Later, Dan Raymond. Ah, nice. All right, I'm going to kick things off here, and I'll keep an eye on the waiting room as well as people trickle in. And let me just start off with a bit of a screen share here. All right, welcome everybody. As I said, thanks for logging in. This is our virtual member session, National Technical Team presentations. So for those of you who do not know, we are in the process of selecting a new national technical team. And we're down to sort of the later stages of the tryout process. And so this process looks a little bit different than it did when we selected a team 4 or 5 years ago, which involved more of an on-snow component. But with some of the changes to the environment that we are living and working in this time around, we've altered the process a little bit to be just a virtual process. So we had a call go out for applicants to the National Technical Team last season, and the deadline passed this winter for them to submit initial applications. And then we've arrived where we are now at a short list of 6 people who are still in the running to be part of the National Technical Team, who will present to you tonight. And in just a second, I'll introduce those people. But just so you know or are aware as well, the National Technical Team is our volunteer group that helps to guide and steer the technical aspects of our organization. So over the years, it's been known as several different things: technical and educational committee, tech committee, that type of thing. And the current iteration of this group is the National Technical Team. So the team is assembled basically to act as a link between the membership and the board of directors of CASI, and to provide input and guidance and suggestions to the board of directors as far as technical content on our courses goes. My name is Jeff Chandler. I'm the Director of Education and Programs, and I work directly with the team to kind of provide that link between them as the technical aspect and the board of directors via Simon Holden, who's the executive director. And so the role of the technical team is to make those recommendations and suggestions to the board of directors on anything technical. So course content, program changes or updates, course standards, evaluator training methods, all of those things. Anything that happens basically on snow or that has to do with instructor training, this sort of falls under the umbrella of the technical team. And so the process is that the members of the technical team are expected to be active in the industry and continually working to help guide and improve CASI's programs. And then it sort of falls to me as the paid staff member that works for CASI to implement those changes. So as those changes and suggestions get brought forth, and the ones that are adopted and approved by the board of directors get implemented into our courses and our programs. So just so you sort of have sort of a background on what the team is. So we are selecting a new team, and they'll be in place for a number of the next couple of seasons, 2 to 3 seasons. The current team has been there for 5 years because of issues with COVID towards the end of the previous term, where we ended up extending it for a year because we weren't able to hold any selections. And so this team existing outgoing team has been there for a number of years now. And we're looking for a new team. I would also like to take this time to thank all of the outgoing team members that have spent the last 5 years volunteering for CASI and spending lots of time on these Zoom calls. Many of them are on this call. Probably most of them are on this call today. And they've put in a lot of effort and volunteer time over the years. So I'd like to recognize the outgoing technical team: Mel and Jay, Adam Gardner, Yuki Kawada, Breen Trott, Jamie Forbes, and Luc Belanger. and just want to thank them as well for all the time that they've put in. So on to tonight's presentation. So basically the goal for tonight is to involve you as the CASI members into this selection process, and also give the prospective team members a chance to share some of their technical thoughts with you in this member session. So each one will be limited to approximately 10 minutes or so, well, exactly 10 minutes. As you know, the may or may not know, the kind of overarching goal or topic that they were assigned to present on has to do with, let me just read it here actually, so that I get it correct. I can't access it right now. Basically, it's what is the teaching or riding discovery that you've made in the last few years that has positively impacted your teaching or snowboarding skills, and that's sort of the goal that they're or the question that they're aiming to answer here tonight. So first up, I'll go through all 6 now. I'll give you a bit of an introduction to everybody, and then we'll turn it over to the group. Presenting first will be Adam Gardner. Adam is a outgoing technical team member, so has been part of the last team and is reapplying to be part of the team again. Adam is based in Banff, Alberta. He's a level 4 instructor and level 4 evaluator, and has tons and tons of teaching experience, 25 years or more. And that's something that you'll see across the board here with pretty much all 6 of these applicants, that the level of experience is pretty high. And so lots of expertise and lots of knowledge here. So that's Adam Gardner to start us off. That'll be followed up by James Hyland. James is based in Collingwood, Ontario, and is also a level 4 instructor and evaluator. And again, tons of experience, 25 years plus in the industry teaching. James was not on the previous team, so he's applying to be a part of the team for the first time here. And third up will be Michelle Clifford. Michelle's based in Pakenham, Ontario. She's a level 4 instructor and level 2 evaluator, and again, a couple decades of teaching experience, and lots of experience on both the ski and snowboard side as well from Michelle. So she'll be the next one up. Followed by Breen Trott, also based in Pakenham, Ontario. Breen is a level 4 instructor and evaluator as well. 20 years of experience. So that's kind of the common number for everybody, 20 to 25 years. It's a good amount of time. And Breen, as I mentioned, Breen is also a previous team member looking to extend his time on the team. Next up will be Mel and Jay. Melon's based in Big White Ski Resort in British Columbia. Melon is also a level 4 instructor and a level 4 evaluator. And again, that tons and tons of teaching experience and evaluating experience for CASI. And Melon is also was also part of the previous team. And then last but not least, Dom Oshanik, based in Whistler, British Columbia. Dom is a level 4 instructor and new level 4 evaluator as of this season, and lots of time in the industry in British Columbia as well from Dom. All right, I'm going to stop talking and stop sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to Adam Gardner. So Adam, you'll need to unmute your microphone. I'm going to mute mine. And then Adam, I can share your presentation from here, or you can share your screen, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, I think I can do it from my end here. It's all good.
Okay.
We good to go?
Go ahead.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, thanks for everyone for having me on here, but also thanks for everyone that's tuning in. So yeah, after all my years of teaching here, I'm always trying to find ways to make things simpler and simpler. So that's the basis of my presentation here, is trying to make things pretty clear and simple and come up with an idea that'll work for all our members, not exclusive to any, high level course people or anything like that. So that being said, I put together a bit of a presentation here as far as some of the ideas I have. Let me just pull it up. If I can, oh, here we are. Share screen. All right. So I think you can see that. All Right. So yeah, just the simple idea here of finding some keywords to engage your students that get results, trying to, not replace any technical language that happens, but just try to cue movements through some simpler words here. So some words mean more than others. So depending on the student, certain words will engage them more than others. Finding these words may take some back and forth brainstorming, and always looking for the clues that you found the right one. So I actually had it today when we were talking about carving. I was up on the hill teaching, and I was just using the word roll for somebody to roll onto the new edge. And first thing they said was, man, it's so helpful just using that one word, roll. It helps me figure out what I need to do. So just some simple stuff like that. I'm sure we've all seen our students freak out when there's so much going on. They overthink, and actually you can see visible performance problems. So keeping things simple is key. And then what I found is descriptive words work best. So describe the outcome that you want to achieve. So for example, if you want to get some sort of outcome happening down a certain pitch, it's good to find words that'll work right before you drop in. So I've broken it down into two separate things here. So step 1 and 2. So step 1, just recognizing. So it's important your students have to understand some of the technique. So once they understand some of the technique and movements involved, just trying to find keywords that trigger actions. And part of it is getting them to speak about their objectives. So what they want to do down a certain run. That could change from run to run, or it could be a theme for the whole day. So I like to use leading questions to help develop just keywords for my students. So I just have an example here of a leading question. So it's one I used on the weekend actually. So it's firm down here. Should we attack this run, or should we try to ride with more finesse? So there's two kind of descriptive words there that can cue some actions. We got attack or finesse. So the second example here is just talking about more like a riding task. So exploring maybe some short turns, some words I've learned directly from my students that help engage certain aspects that work in these turns. And I'm sure a lot of people that are listening in on this call have heard me say some of this stuff too, but some of you guys have actually taught me these as well. So short turns, a couple words here that make a lot of sense. Explosive, attack, quick, grip, power, push. So the bottom here, I've just said, just have a quick think about what are some keywords that you would think of right before you're about to drop in and riff some short turns. So step 2, after you recognize, you got to remember the word. So again, technically, there's a lot for most people to remember, especially when we're talking about, technique. So for a student, when they're writing, just using simple keywords, it'll just make their actions and ambitions just a little more memorable just by kind of saying one word. And the big one here I like to do with my students is just get them saying it out loud before they drop in, whatever their word might be for that run. And usually you can start to see some results pretty easy there. So I put another example under here for what I do, especially when I'm doing some of the writing tasks here, maybe some of my demos. So for my short turns, before I drop in, I just kind of recite the word in my head. Sometimes I say it out loud depending on the day, but before I drop in, I say the word tight. And it just reminds me that if I keep my position and movements tight in all different planes, I can move pretty quickly and just get myself in less trouble. So it seems to add just a little bit of performance to my demos. So yeah, once you've found a word that works for your students, I just get them in the habit of saying it out loud before they drop in. And it can also get repeated from turn to turn if you need to. Yeah, it seems to cue things up pretty good. So yeah, some pretty simple stuff here. I mean, it's just a really good way to start to simplify some of the technical language that we sometimes use. the last clip here is just thank you. And my note here is just remember your teaching is only as good as the buy-in you're getting from your students. So, you could have a great lesson that technically checks all the boxes, but if there's not a connection there through some language usually, it might miss the mark. So I'm always trying to find a balance between the technical explanations and just those simple keywords just to engage my audience. And the results I see the most that work really well are, especially when we start thinking about some of the writing tasks in the level 3 and 4, just getting your candidates just to find out what works for them. And usually what happens is saying it out loud before they drop in starts to get some results rather than thinking about all the movements that are required. And yeah, that's about it. Pretty simple stuff. My goal here was, like I said, it's just something that all the members can use. It's not exclusive to high-end teaching or anything like that. It's just some simple stuff. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you, guys. I don't want to go over time, so that's it. Thank you.
Right on. Cool. Thank you, Adam. You can go ahead and stop your screen share there. And so one thing that I didn't mention at the start in my introduction there is we will, I have a little bit of a feedback poll between each presentation. So I'm just going to launch the first poll here. And the results will not be shared. So, and the polls are also anonymous. So we are using these presentations to assist in the selection of the team members. Ultimately, the decision will be made by the selection committee, the technical team selection committee, but the polling here will be used for a couple different reasons. It will help to guide our decisions, and it will also give the presenters some feedback on their presentations. So let me see if I can track down the first poll here. I'm going to launch it right now. We'll take about 60 seconds or so for you to go through the 3 questions, maybe 2 minutes before we move on to the next presenter. Just over a minute. I'll give another 20 seconds or so here for the last few answers, and then we're going to move on to our next presenter, which is James Highland. All right, 3, 2, 1, and we'll end that one there. Okay. Okay, James, you're up next as our second presenter. So you'll have to unmute your microphone and share your screen.
All right, we good to go? Everybody can see that? Everybody can hear me? Sweet. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it. I just want to say thank you so much, Cassie family, for giving me the opportunity to talk to so many people at one time. This is freaking amazing. So what I want to do today is sort of discuss how to develop self-awareness in our riders. So sort of the idea of taking internal feelings and things that we're feeling inside the body and sort of correlating that with the external environment. So feelings that we're getting from the external environment. So one of the ways that we can do this is we just get into this idea that we're always taking feedback from the outside. So we're giving people feedback or we're getting feedback. And I think we can do a better job of getting inside and getting some feedback from what's happening inside the body. I'm a natural movement coach on the side as well for over a decade, sort of helping people to rediscover how to move through natural environments like in an efficient way. So I'm pulling a little bit from that. And what I did here was I just broke it down into the tried and true, what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, and how we're going to do it. So today I'm going to help you guys understand how to develop self-awareness in both teaching and riding. Why the teaching? Well, it helps to develop and communicate outcomes more clearly to our students. So if we understand more clearly what's happening with the body, then we can more clearly explain in simple words what to do, right? Why for the students or for the riders? Well, it improves self-analysis. So I found myself a lot of the time out shredding by myself, and maybe I'm leading sessions, so I'm not generally getting a lot of like verbal feedback from anybody else. So I have to rely on going sort of internal and figuring out what I'm feeling from the external environment, what I'm doing with my body, and how those two are kind of correlating or how they're relating, right? So how we're going to do this is we're going to bring some focus to the feelings and the sensations that we're getting from the external environment and that we're feeling because we're moving in a specific way. Cool? So one of the most underutilized aspects, I think, of the day is the dynamic warm-up. We all kind of gloss over it a little bit. We know we need to do it, but I think we could add a little bit more sustenance, some more meat, if we do it with intention, right? So if you would, I know you guys are probably all sitting down, but if you could stand up, I'm just going to do a quick example of what I mean by creating sensations and correlating them. So I want you to lift up your right leg at 90 degrees. I want you to bend your knee. Okay, so we're balancing on our left foot, and we're just going to start bouncing. And I want you to pay specific attention to the ball of the foot, from the front of the foot all the way onto the ball. And then you're going to lean back a bit, and you're going to feel the pressure on the heel of the foot. Now, these are all things, just switch feet now. I'm going to switch it up. Now, these are all feelings that are coming through the foot from the ground because we're moving. And I'm feeling pressure build up. I'm feeling pressure spike. And we can all sit down now. That's about 30 seconds of, say, a 10-minute warm-up that you would normally do. But those are all feelings that we can now relate the real sensations, right? So pressure is this concept that's like kind of just what's pressure? I mean, how do I understand pressure? Well, simply by feeling, right? And we have to move in order to feel. So to build a dynamic warm-up, let's start from the ground up. Our feet are connected to the board that hits the snow. That's where we're getting a lot of those sensations building. And we have to start building some awareness around that so that we can start taking that information in and making appropriate moves, right? So we're not always focused on getting some external feedback. So students explain the way they feel when they do this. So you can just roll through your normal dynamic warm-up and just simply bring attention to, say, the ankle or the knee or the quad. Or are you feeling tense anywhere today, right? And simply by doing that, you're teaching somebody to feel their body and how it's moving. And that's super important. We've kind of lost connection with how our body moves. So bringing people, even at the lowest level, first day on snow, right? Bringing some awareness to a sensation or a feeling helps relate. So you can guide your students through specific things. Once you get into this, you can actually build like specific movements that are actually going to trigger some more on snow stuff. So I think I kind of glossed over it a little bit, but by doing this, we're starting to build internal awareness of concepts like pressure, tension, stiffness, and we're always giving people feedback like, I just want you to loosen up, Well, I don't know that I'm holding any tension. If you don't understand what that feels like, then how do you get rid of it, right? So you've done your dynamic warm up. Now you bring it on hill. Things that you're going to notice when you do bring it on hill is that you've built a common language between you and the student. So they sort of understand what you mean by pressure through the foot. They sort of understand what you mean by tension or relax, right? They have a better understanding, so that improves the feedback that you're going to give them. It's not just, hey, you know what? I want you to bend your knees and loosen up, right? They have an idea of how you want them to bend their knees, what it should feel like, right? So that also then in turn expedites skill development. And the whole key here is that when you get on hill, you move with intention. You move with an idea that you want to create a feeling. Now, you don't think a lot about this, just pay attention when you're on hill, right? And you start getting people to start paying attention to what they're doing and how they're feeling. Not systematic, like I will need to build this specific movement and it has to be this way. It's just more of a feeling, right? So I want to give you a quick example of how I sort of used this the other day with a client. This gentleman came, he needed to improve his short turns on some steeper terrain. It's kind of icy around this zone. So I knew I needed to work with some fast movements from the ankle, just subtle fast movements. And I wanted to correlate that with a hip movement. So we did a dynamic warm-up that focused on the feelings that he could then bring to the green and blue runs. So we did that. We moved out to the green and blue runs, and we started patterning these feelings while we were actually riding, just reliving the sensation, the feeling. This is what I want you to focus on. Not like I need you to bend this way and that way. It's just like relive this feeling. Took it to the black runs. Things started getting a little bit disproportionate. He was a little bit behind. So the real big advantage of being more self-aware as a teacher is the entire time this was happening, I was actually experiencing these feelings, right? I was realizing, hey, you know what? There's something that's happening here that I want to relay to this person. And all I had to say was, make your turn quicker. I want you to feel like you're turning into starting the next turn before you should. I want you to feel like you're like, oh, I need to start the turn. And boom, the guy put all of it together. It was just that feeling that I kind of related to him, and he was pretty stoked. So just to sort of wrap things up in a little bow here, for me, the biggest game changer in my riding and my teaching has literally been developing the skill of self-awareness. So giving myself the space to feel, to understand what my body's doing and how that relates to the environment. Am I feeling grip? Am I feeling tension? Am I doing what I need to do, right? I've been obviously working outside of the snowboard industry, and there's lots of opportunity if you're training by yourself, lifting weights, whatever, trail running, biking. Bring awareness to those movements as well. I mean, there's a reason why yoga is going off the hook, right? People enjoy that presence, and it really, really, really helps to create an awareness of the body and how it moves. And then it makes our job a hell of a lot easier to help people get better at moving, because that's what we do, if they know how to move. That's basically me. Now I got a sweet little tagline. Now go out and get in touch with your feelings, folks. Thank you very much. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much, James. All right. Pretty much 10 minutes there. Let me just navigate to our second poll here for James. Nice. Okay, I'm going to launch our second poll here. This is the feedback for James. Same 3 questions. We'll do the same. I'll give 90 seconds here, and then we'll move on. Just also want to point out we're at 93 participants here, which is, I think, a record for a CASI Zoom call. And I think our limit is 100. So we may see a capacity crowd here on this member session, which would be cool. I think Mike Bray wins the award for the best setting, and that's probably not a Zoom background either. All right, 20 seconds here. Okay, we'll cut that one off there. And our next presenter will be Michelle Clifford. And Michelle, same thing. You'll need to unmute and then you can share your screen.
Right, sweet. Hello, everybody.
There we go. All good.
Oh, shared the whole thing, I think. Oh, yeah, look at that. All right, so welcome, everybody. Excited to be here. So something that's been really helpful for me the last couple seasons, not being on the snow as much as I hoped and want to be, is training a different aspect. So I'm still keeping myself motivated, keeping myself learning, and keeping the stoke alive. So when I do get on snow, it's even more awesome. So just real quick, I came back to Ontario, which is very different from the mountains of BC. I had a couple more kids, and my position in my snow school has put me behind a desk a little bit more. So, and then last season with the provincial shutdown, there's been a lot of barriers to getting on the snow. So trying to use a different training plan to keep myself stoked and back on snow and focus more when I get onto snow. So the idea of training your mind, so mental imagery, training your brain when you're not able to be on snow to optimize your snow time. So through visualization and imagery strategies and a lot of video as analysis tools. Go. So I should say, I'm not in any way a PhD in sports psychology, but I really am interested in this topic. I would love to learn more if somebody on this call is more experienced in this, but mental imagery and mental training has just been very helpful for me, and it can be very applicable for a lot of CASI members when you're training for your higher levels, or even if you're not on snow, you're injured and you want to keeping yourself involved and motivated. It's a really great tool to keep that going. So what is mental training? So strategies to prepare your mind to perform at a high performance level, or really just at your very best. Purposeful and focused mental practice of skills or specific skills or movement patterns to achieve a goal. It can be a very simple goal, or it can be a complex goal of getting your level 4, or it's performing a toe side turn more efficiently. And so when you're training this, it's setting the scene in your mind that mimics the scene in real life and what you would be doing on snow. So like I said, training for your level, your higher levels or any levels, training just to improve your own riding in the park, or just specifically parts of the turn or parts of something that you're doing on snow. And so how does mental training work? So goal-oriented, very task specific. What is it that you're trying to achieve? want to be specific. What do you need to do to achieve that goal? What physically, what feelings, very good segue from James, what feelings and movement patterns is required to create the results that you're looking for? And so when you're training off snow at home, in your mind, like imagine yourself performing that task well, imagine performing it correctly, and the sequences are all there. So having like a perfect practice in your mind. And while you're doing this, like when you're on snow, things happen. You lose balance, you fall, traffic comes out on the hill. So train those what ifs. So you're ideally you're keeping that focus, but if you get that distraction, how do you refocus? Because on snow, you sometimes will lose that focus. How do you bring it back to the task, the goal that you've set out for yourself? And when you're training this in your mind, trying to keep it positive and bring it back to your best performance. So a few ways that helped me get started is just starting small with simple tasks. Like can be as simple as practicing how to tie your shoes and like giving it your full focus to tie your shoes just in your mind, and maybe making it better when you put it into practice, and then building it into complex maneuvers. Try to dedicate a small amount of time each day. So like 5 to 10 minutes. Close your eyes, get into your space, relax, and keep focus on the task. If you get distracted, bring it back. So I have a task for you guys. So sitting here, hopefully you're comfortable and relaxed. I'd like you all to close your eyes, and I'm going to set a scene for you. All right. And so this should be familiar to most of us if we're all snowboarders. So you're standing at the top of a run. You can choose the run. It's a bluebird day, fresh corduroy, warm, nobody's around, right? Your feet, you just strap your feet in, put your goggles down, you start sliding, start turning. Right? How does it feel? How does the snow feel? How does your body feel as you're going left, you're going right? Right? It gets a little bit steeper, you're going a little bit faster, right? How are you feeling on the snow? Are you tired? Are you cold? Right? Visualize your movement patterns going left and right. And as you come into the bottom, coming in, slow it down, stop, take your goggles off, right? Trying to get into a headspace that you feel like you're there. You should feel muscle tensions. You should feel full, like your body is fully engaged in that learning process and that visualization. So it doesn't have to be much. It can be little segments, like I said. And so if you are being very specific in your movements, in your visualization on snow, hopefully that will mimic what you're going to be feeling on snow. So when we're doing this, there's different perspectives that you can visualize. So that task that I just asked you to try is very internal. So you're seeing yourself through your own eyes. Another perspective is kind of an external task. So as if you are watching yourself perform. And that's where the video comes in really great, is a great self-analysis and as a reference tool. So I try to take video or have somebody take video of me riding. And it's just a great opportunity to check in, like, what am I doing? What do I want to be doing? Am I doing what I've been training in my head for? Or what is missing in my writing? What can I add to my writing? And when you video yourself doing that task correctly, and then watch yourself perform doing that task correctly, and you go back to visualize yourself doing that task, the connection is a lot stronger when you're visualizing yourself doing it. So then video as a tool as a reference. So I have also watched other people snowboarding, and snowboarding well. I like watch for the Olympics, for example. That's a cool video. Watching others gives me some inspiration, but being very realistic with my expectations. So there might be something that Anna Gasser does really great when she hits the big air, but I need to be very realistic that with my expectations of what I can perform, but maybe she does something that I could add to my writing. So video for yourself as an analysis and to check in, but also if others can be a good way to kind of set the tone of something that you want to add to your writing. So applying what you practice. So why would we want to do this? I've mentioned it a little bit. If your time on snow is very limited and you want to keep pushing it. But then it also allows a little bit more focused training on snow. So when you do get on snow, it's very purposeful. You've been training the movement patterns in your head, and now you can execute. Is this what I want to be doing? Is this actually working? Is what I'm seeing and practicing in my head, can I execute it? And so matching the sensations that you create in your mental training while you're on snow and kind of bringing it full circle. And then kind of checking in with your goals. So like I mentioned, this has been a great tool. Ontario, Mount Pakenham is not a very large mountain, so the caliber of riding is I'm not always on steeps, and getting the full training that I have had before. So this is a great opportunity just to keep going, keep pushing myself, keep practicing, and it can be a very useful tool for others. It definitely helped me training for my level 4. And like I said, just continues making myself excited to get on snow as I think about it so much when I'm not on snow. And then it also gives me a little reminder that there's way more to it than sliding around on the bunny hill like I do on the regular basis these days. I think that was it for me. So mostly thank you. Great tool to use, great tool to add. Start simple, and it just can give a little bit more oomph to that training that you're trying to do on snow, and a little bit more focus to the goals that you're trying to achieve. So thank you, and right on. Appreciate the time.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. All right. Number 3, where are we here? Here comes poll number 3 for Michelle. Same thing, we'll give 90 seconds here. And then next up will be Breen. All right, another 30 seconds here. All right, 3, 2, and 1. There we go. Okay, next up is Breen Trott, also from Ontario. So Breen, same thing. If you want to unmute your microphone and you can share your screen.
How's it going, guys?
Loud and clear. There we go. Nice.
All right, hello everybody. I'm Breen Trott. I live in Pakenham, Ontario. Before I start, I'd just like to say that the tech team is really fun. So if any of you guys are inspiring to be tech team members, you got 4 years to get yourself in order and apply. All right, so my focus is on skill development and specifically the skill development model in freestyle. So I started skiing when I was 7 years old, and my skis were basically just transportation to move me around to the next jump. And then in 95, I was down in Stowe and I saw a bunch of snowboarders go to the park, about 20 of them, and they all trained all the jumps. And that definitely sparked my interest. So the next day I convinced my dad to run us some snowboards, and that was the end of the story. So when I was about 20, I moved out west and spent about 10 years in the mountains, which was pretty awesome. Now I've moved back to Ontario. So now I work and live in Pakenham, Ontario, which, as you guys heard from Michelle, it's a pretty small hill. It's about 86 meters of vertical. And if it snows at all, you can't really ride it because it's not steep enough. So one of the things that I've been struggling with the last 5 years is kind of keeping myself interested in the sport. So basically, I'm going to be talking about the skill development stages. So there's initiation, acquisition, consolidation, refinement, and creating variation. So often at high levels, we're kind of stuck in the refinement, creating variation stages, which is great. You're cruising down a super steep run and the snow is blowing in your face. And with every turn, you're kind of self-analyzing and refining those movements, and the next turn is even better than the last. So those last two stages, refinement and creating variation, are very rewarding. One thing that I have noticed is that they also have some downsides. So refinement and the creative variation stages can be very frustrating. Our old habits that we have can be pretty hard to change. Progress can be very slow to come. So some of the challenges that we work on, sometimes they take a month, sometimes they take a season to kind of change, but can be pretty frustrating. Identifying the cause of the problem can be pretty difficult, especially if you don't have a coach behind your shoulder. So trying to figure all that stuff out on your own can be pretty tricky. And then, of course, training for the next level can be very emotionally draining and mentally challenging in both our teaching and riding, as we're kind of always working in that refinement stage of the development model. So what about the first three, the initiation, acquisition, and consolidation? What can we learn from those? So can those stages be rewarding? What if you don't have steep runs and high elevation and lots of powder? So how do you kind of keep yourself interested and stay positively drawn to the sport? I remember training for the level 4, and it was quite a tiring process. So lots of session riding and lots of tweaking in your riding. And it can be a lot of work, so much so that it almost turns snowboarding into kind of work and not as much fun. So the question is, what has positively interested us or influenced our riding or teaching in the last few seasons? So basically, I was out riding the park the other day and I landed a new trick and I was really excited. Like, the feelings that you get are pretty awesome. So I decided, hey, maybe that's what I'm going to talk about. Yeah, so at Pakenham, you ride in the chair for about 7 minutes and then you get 1 minute of snowboarding. So sometimes it can be hard to think like, hey, what's the point of even doing this? It takes me a minute to strap in and I get to go snowboarding for a minute. But the good thing is that learning something new can be really rewarding, and it brings a lot of pride and joy to your heart. Progressing through the skill development model can bring back a lot of motivation and positivity. So one of the neat things about learning something new is that you might get to dive through that whole development cycle in maybe a day or maybe a week. Whereas when you're kind of working in the refinement stage, the changes come really slowly and can be kind of hard to get those changes, and it can be tough. So how does this affect our teaching? Moving through the skill development model, how can that make us a better teacher? So one thing that comes to mind is kind of hanging out on the carpet, and you hear a frustrated instructor or a parent, and they're just yelling at their student, bend your knees, pizza. So of course the student can't do it because they don't know how to slide on what they're sliding on. So bending their knees isn't going to happen because they're still learning how to slide.
Hi, Mommy.
So moving back to those beginner stages can be very helpful to the instructor, right? You're trying something new, you're falling, you're experiencing, you can't do it. So it's very humbling. So yeah, I think this is something that you could bring to, we always see those, and I'm guilty of being a bit burnt out sometimes and jaded on the ski hill. You're having a tough day and all your friends are out riding and you're kind of stuck teaching. So sometimes that can be kind of hard. So just kind of re-experiencing some of those earlier stages and remembering that, hey, like this is a fun thing to learn, and it's hard to learn, and I need to give this person my full attention so that I can make them better at this. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm not really a park rider and I'm not interested in the terrain park, which is fine. The main thing here is that as we learn new skills and kind of re-experience some of those earlier stages in the skill development, it can be humbling, and it can make us remember what it feels like to be a beginner, which can be really important when we're teaching. I am interested in riding parks, so I'm very fortunate about that because I know that moving back to Ontario was pretty hard. So if I didn't have a way to keep progressing on my snowboarding, then I might have kind of moved on to other things. But I'm really glad that I'm still out here riding my board around. Yeah, so at such a small hill, it is difficult to kind of refine your turns because there's not a lot of speed and there's not a lot of vertical. So learning something new gives me a chance to kind of go back to those earlier stages and kind of work through the whole cycle in maybe a day or a week. So if you're not a park rider, just some quick tips. You don't want to wait till the springtime to get into the park. So if you are interested, get out there in the fall and start checking outside of the park. If you are doing a lap in the park, you might be doing 2 outside of the park, working on the side hits and across the fall line to kind of figure some of that stuff out. Obviously, you want to warm up slowly. That's kind of how you get hurt. So there's no rush. Get comfortable in the features before you start trying something new. And after you peak, you want to start cooling down. You're not going to learn something when you're tired. If you're having trouble with a trick or even just having trouble learning a new task, take a break and do something else and come back to it. And then, of course, use terrain as a stepping stone. So we're not trying to learn tricks down the fall line. That's pretty intimidating and it can be kind of dangerous. So we're always starting slowly kind of across the fall line. So basically what I've learned in recent seasons that's positively inspired my teaching and riding is that you always need to kind of keep challenging yourself and progressing, or you're going to kind of flatten out and not get anywhere. Constantly learning new maneuvers is a great way to keep interested in the sport. And progressing through that skill development model reminds us what it feels like to be a beginner, which I feel like is really important when we are out on the bunny hill trying to teach something new to somebody and they're not getting it. It kind of helps us with our empathy and compassion and our patience in our riding. So I challenge you guys, it doesn't have to be park related, but get out there and try something new, a new skill, and remind yourself what it feels like to be a beginner. And hopefully that will improve your riding and your teaching. That's pretty much it. And thanks for listening.
Great. Thanks, Breen. All right, Breen, I'll get you to go ahead and stop your screen share there, and then I'm going to launch our next poll. There we go. Awesome. All right, poll number 4. Here we go. And we'll give it another minute or so here, and next presenter will be Mel and Jay. All right, 15 seconds here, and then we're going to move on. All right, I'm going to end the poll there. Definite bonus points for performance under pressure there, Breen. Okay, Mel and Jay, you're up next, and
Awesome.
It's all yours.
Awesome. So you're going to pull up my presentation there, Jeff?
Yes, give me 1 second here.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Just kind of a split presentation between some slides and some visuals tonight.
No problem.
Thanks, everybody. Awesome. So my presentation is delving into the why behind the why. And we're going to talk a little bit about the physiology of pressure tonight. And so first off, I'd like to identify a common problem that I've been seeing in candidates. So if we go to the next slide there, one of the things that I find I talk a lot about from all my courses, people that I train and work through, is that snowboarders, they flex low, and especially on the heel edge, and then they stay low, and we call it parking and riding. And they park and ride throughout the bulk of the turn, and then at the very end of the turn, they sharply extend. And the result of this is that they lose pressure during the turn. Lower level riders may end up with actual heel edge chatter, and higher level riders end up with a complete lack of performance out of the heel edge turn. So I'd like to bring your attention to the GIF that's playing on the screen there. And if you look at the rider as they're going through this turn, you can see that they're into that low flex position. And then as you take another look through that, take your eyes down and cast them down and see what's going on with the snowboard. You're going to see a little bit of heel edge chatter happening, and you're going to see a real lack of performance all the way through. So hopefully you're seeing and have seen the same stuff that I've been seeing for a while, but in particular the last couple of years as we're chasing more and more higher performance riding. And so the fix that you'll find for this answer is frequently in the end of the Cassie reference guide is you'll see over and over the problem with chatter or lack of performance is a pressure issue. And the fix for it, from intermediate sliding turns all the way through to some expert carved and sliding turns, is that the rider's asked to make more constant movements to be able to create pressure. And so this is a little bit of a circular argument. What's the problem? We're missing pressure. What's the fix? Constant movement. What's the why? Well, so you can create pressure. And so what we're going to do tonight is I want to bring you through a little exercise about the why behind the why. And this is how muscles and tendons function. Let's roll to the next slide there. And so what this is all about is how muscles work. If you studied any physiology, you might have seen the sliding filament model, and you might have thought it's pretty complicated, but it's really not actually. What it is it's something we're really familiar with as snowboarders. The effect of the sliding filament is a movement that we're really familiar with. It's called ratcheting. And if you've ever had this happen to you before, ever had a binding where the ratchet's not quite working and the ladder's a little bit worn down and it just keeps slipping open on you. This is what I'm going to use to describe the sliding filament model so we understand it from a perspective that we already used. Hop onto the next slide. And I'd like you to think about muscles along this sliding binding model. And so muscles have, just like bindings, they have a thin filament. This is the ladder strap here, and this is attached to the tendons. And then it has the big strap, the thick filament, and that has the ratchets or the myosin heads on it. And so the thin filament is what attaches to the tendons, but the thick filament is what actually does the work of muscles and does the action of creating that tightening effect. But with a slipping binding, as soon as you stop ratcheting, you think it's tight enough, but then it starts to loosen off as you bring your hands away, right? And the problem with muscles is that unless they're actively tightening, they're slipping. And if they slip enough, they end up losing all tension up against their tendon ends. And they end up with this huge amount of slack. And then it takes a whole bunch of energy to get the binding line back up again before you can continue to create muscle tension. That should make a little bit more sense in terms of the sliding binding model for how muscles work. So onto the next slide, we can talk about how this actually starts to affect our ability to create pressure. So in example 1, which is a lot like the park and ride, if you flex low and you stay in a squat, and then you try and jump as high as possible, the sliding binding model gets us this idea where as we flex down, we ratchet and create tension. But while we're holding low, that ratchet actually slips and slides open so that tension is completely lost. Now there's slack in the system that needs to be taken up before pressure can be recreated. And so this is the problem if you sink low, park, and ride. In example 2, when a person flexes to that same squat depth but then immediately jumps higher, the result is the jump is higher. In the sliding bonding model, this idea is that there's no time for the ratchets to slip open. You flex, create tension, and then create more tension as you're extending through. And that smooth extension keeps constant pressure, allows us to build on the pressure that we've built from flexion and transfer that right into extension. If you go on to the next slide, thanks. As we put this into practice, we can use this idea of the why behind the why to use a smarter pressure to create better performance and to reduce chatter. So how, what, and why are really key to CASI explanations. And we've got a fair why in the CASI reference guide. This idea that constant movement is key to creating pressure. But hopefully tonight, you've learned a little bit more about the physiology of how our muscles work, the why behind the why. And so this allows us to understand a little bit more, teach our students better, help to learn ourselves through some of the methods of visualization, conscious energy and conscious connection to our bodies, of creating tension in our muscles and then using that immediately to use that constant pressure to be able to create performance, reduce chatter, and basically ride a little bit better. Hopefully this has helped you understand a little bit about muscles and a lot about snowboarding. Thanks so much. Next slide. This is just a thanks. And then there's a series of references. If you want to take a screenshot or look at this later, there's my references. There's some pretty cool scientific material that really relates to snowboarding. And this is where I drew it from. So thanks so much for letting me put this together and show you some cool ideas. Hopefully you've learned a little bit.
Great, thanks, Melon.
Thanks, Jeff.
I'll leave this here for a second if anybody wants to screenshot that. And then I will throw up the next poll. All right, poll number 5. Okay, here we go. All right, another minute or so here. Before we turn it over to our final presenter of the night, which is Dom Oshanek. And 5 more seconds, and then I'll shut down this one. Okay. All right, Dom, you are our 6th presenter here, so you can go ahead and share your screen and unmute your microphone.
Hey, I'm actually not going to share my screen because I'm going to take us for a little cool down lap. I kind of wanted this session to feel a little bit like a session out on the mountain. So you guys can leave the gallery up and we can all look at each other. You can blow me up on big screen. I think we'll just talk. Sweet. So I just want to start by saying how like mind-blowing it is for me to be here on the same platform as these guys. Adam gave me my level 1. Melon trained me for like 5 years, or probably more than that at Silver Star. So it's pretty mind-blowing to be here. So I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. So what I've learned in the last few years, I've been doing a lot of training, running like level 3 training and a little bit of level 4 training and becoming a level 4 evaluator. So what I've learned is a lot of practical stuff for that high-end stuff, but I was trying to think about how I can relate what I've learned there for all of you. And really what it comes down to is that I've learned the importance of practice, which sounds so stupid coming out of my mouth because we all know how important practice is. But, you know, when you really sit down and be honest with yourself, or at least when I do, I have to think like, do I really put 50% of my lesson towards mileage, or do I talk a lot more than I think? And especially going through training level 3s and level 4s, I realized that we all talk way more than we think, and we don't leave enough time for that dedicated mileage and practice with that little bit of guidance from the instructor. So that's kind of just what I want to talk about tonight. Something that came up for me that triggered this was when I went to the level 4 exams and I got some feedback from Jeff and Adam. It took me like a solid 5 days to take that feedback on, make a change, and go through the steps of like evolving that and bringing that to something that meant that was useful to me, and to consolidate that. So practice was like a huge part of that week for me. And that was something that I hadn't had for the last 2 years, where with COVID, I've been pretty lax on training myself. I had just kind of had fun. I was taking the opportunity of not working so much to just go out and ride POW and enjoy myself. And I realized that I hadn't really made any progress in my riding in that time. So maybe you guys can kind of start to think back to some time over this last period and ask yourself, like, have I really put aside any dedicated time to practicing and really improving myself? I think for a lot of the lower end members, like level 1s and level 2, you guys probably can say, yes, I do that like every day. I really want that new level. But for some of us higher end riders, maybe we aren't quite so on that level, like Breen was saying, right? Like being in the park has given him that kind of motivation, right? And so some of the things that can help drive that practice are things like Adam's keywords, right? Cueing yourself for the style of riding that you want to go for, or James's feelings, right? Queuing up an internal sensation that you can kind of follow. And you can prepare that with what Michelle was saying, preparing, you know, beforehand, making a bit of a plan, like deciding that you're going to go out and ride this bumpy mogul run, and this is the way you're going to ride it, right? You can prepare that ahead of time. And then if you've got an understanding of biomechanics like Melon does, then you can make a better plan, right? So you can understand better going into that. So yeah, it just requires being honest with yourself and checking in. Am I setting enough time apart in my lesson for my students to get that kind of guidance and that kind of training? And then are you setting enough time aside for yourself to do that? So I just wanted to go through a few examples and then maybe a little bit of practice, seeing as that's the theme of kind of what I'm talking about here. So one thing that you can do if you're training your own riding is there's plenty of, we can get caught in a trap of just kind of going out and riding and banging our head against the wall. We don't know what the next step is in our improvement if we're just doing it by ourselves. So like Michelle was saying, you can take some video of yourself and you can kind of check in with yourself that way. But if you look at this call, we've got 95 people here in Cassie who are all very passionate. Like we've all turned out for an hour and a half here to talk about snowboarding. And I think that's just super cool. And I bet you if you reached out to any one of these people and sent them a video and say, hey, you know, Dom, what do you think about my turns here? Like, do you have any advice? I know that I would be, and I think pretty much everyone here would be totally open to, you know, dedicating a few seconds of their time to giving you some advice. And if you want a little bit more than that, there's programs out there now. There's plenty of like online learning platforms that are opening up. This is like the new kind of wave in snowboarding. If you want a little bit more dedication and you don't have that trainer right there in front of you, you can find that video kind of option out there now. So there's no excuse to kind of not having something to make your practice deliberate. You can't come up with it on your own. There are plenty of people that you can ask to find that focus and help work towards that goal. In terms of your teaching, I want you to just start by thinking of the last time you taught a beginner lesson and when you taught them to do a heel side slip, how long did you spend just letting them practice that heel side slip? I'm gonna give you about 10, 15 seconds. Just think the last time you taught a beginner. So I had the pleasure of teaching some beginners this morning and they were learning to do a heel side flip. They'd actually learned that the day before. So I started my day by kind of, let's see where you're at. And we spent the whole morning doing heel sides. And the reason that we ended up spending the whole morning, not because I normally would have, they actually got to where I normally would have progressed them to toe side fairly quickly. But I just took a second to ask them like, hey, how much longer do you guys want to keep doing this before we move to the next step? And I was thinking in my head, like, yeah, they're ready. They could go to the next step. I was like almost ready to just start that toe side explanation. And then I asked them that question. They said, oh, you know, like, I think like 2 or 3 more times. And I was kind of blown away. Like they were hungry to build in more practice themselves. Them as beginners knew they needed more practice. And that kind of blew my mind a little bit. Not that I don't think I give enough practice time, but like just like that a beginner is that self-aware, right? So sometimes it's very easy for us to become a little bit self-centered in that lesson and want to give them the next step and want to be like, look how much I've taught you today. Look how much I've explained and how much you've learned. When really they don't actually know the difference, right? They're having a great time just doing a heel side flip. And they just want to get better at it. They don't know what toe side is yet. So you don't need to move them on to the next step, right? Check in with them, ask them how much more time they want to spend practicing this before you give that next explanation. So yeah, for beginners, that's a super easy one. Just ask them because it's really easy to just power through those quick ride steps. For novices, you're going to tend to find that practice happens in jumps. So they're going to be kind of just working, consolidating, getting that skill better. And then all of a sudden a light bulb goes off and you realize, you can see them relax. You can see their riding kind of have a little bit more creativity in it. Maybe they're smiling more, they're having a little bit more fun. They're not frustrated or they're not scared anymore. You have to wait for that moment. It takes a lot of patience. That's something I've learned over the last few years. You have to be very patient with intermediate riders and wait for that moment of kind of creating variation, like Breen was saying, where that's your cue to now move on to the next step. teaching advanced and expert riders, 90% of your time should just be letting them snowboard. That's like I was saying earlier, like it took me 5 days to make one fairly simple change in my riding. And, you know, I'd consider myself an advanced or expert rider. So I think that just shows that, you know, if you're out there doing a level 3 exam or a level 4 exam, and you've got half hour or an hour, I think probably more than 50% of that time should be spent just snowboarding. There's no, like, you know, keep it simple, give them a focus like Adam and James mentioned, a feeling or keyword, mention a little bit of biomechanics like Mel said, so that they're cued in and they know what's going on, and then just take them snowboarding and find that challenge level where they're in that deliberate practice zone and they're making those changes. There's not enough to be said for just snowboarding at a high level. And then finally, I just want to speak to you evaluators and trainers out there, because we don't often get enough practice ourselves. We're out there working on our own and we don't get a lot of feedback. So I just wanted to give you a little advice as an evaluator or a trainer. That when we're especially working on instructors' teaching skills, it's super duper important that we take this training cycle model and we use it and apply it. We practice what we preach and we get them to practice teaching. So if you're going to make a focus on feedback, at the end of that session, not only review the feedback that you did, but have them practice giving the feedback in the way that you gave it, right? So if your focus is on positive 2 try, talk about how you did such a great job of it, but then turn it over to them and give them tasks where they're going to have to use positive 2 try. I find that, you know, at the highest level, I think if we all are honest with ourselves, we haven't done this enough as an organization. And I think that is very cool. We're moving in that direction. On level 2, we have that new A&I session, which is very interactive when we're practicing our teaching skills. On the level 1, we've moved to that workshop format where they're getting involved in teaching sooner and it's less abrupt. It's more like a teaching tactic for their teaching. And I'm really excited to see where that goes for Cassie in the future. I hope that we can kind of keep moving that forward and bring that training cycle model into our pedagogy as trainers. Awesome. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you again so much. And
Thanks, Dom. All right. Yeah, the cool down lap. I like it. Brings everything together there. We have one more poll here to throw up for Dom's presentation. This will be our last poll. You should see it there now. And we'll leave that up for another minute or so. All right, another 10 seconds or so, and then we'll move on and wrap this call up. So as your couple more answers coming in there in the poll. Well, I guess the best thing to say right now is thank you to everybody. Thank you to the presenters. Definitely lots of work and effort and time went into those presentations. This is definitely a new format, a new kind of approach to this. And so a bit of a trial, a bit of a test for sure. And thanks to the 6 presenters that presented tonight, I think there was a lot of value that was brought here. And we didn't quite get to 100, but we hovered around the 95 participant mark, which is pretty cool to see the engagement from Cassie members, which tells me or tells us that this is something that is that everybody's hungry for. So more of this to come for sure, these virtual member sessions. So again, thanks to the presenters. Thanks to you guys for tuning in tonight. This presentation was recorded. I will post it on the CASI YouTube channel so that it's available for you to go back and check out again. And thanks very much, everybody, and have a great evening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.